So welcome to what will hopefully become Newcastle Central in 00 gauge. Right now all we have is a whole bunch of 2x3 and tools. Moving into a new home about a year ago, ended up with this outdoor section, which I'm going to move back a whole ways, but it's basically a 11 foot by 11 foot shed, which is pretty weatherproof. I've left it over the winter just to see how it was going to work out. I had put weatherproofing on the outside, new siding on the outside. I got a little bit of electrical work to do. So then with the sun casting long shadows, there's the first set of benchwork in. Maybe do with some supports across the bottom there just to kind of hold those legs apart. The challenge in doing this was that the floor wasn't quite level. The actual shed itself isn't quite square. Now I'm not going to own up to that part. I didn't actually build this. This was already here. Like I said, I just put the weather sheeting and siding on it. So a little more progress now. We've got the rest of the benchwork in for what is going to be Newcastle Central itself. This ended up being a lot bigger than I had really envisioned. Putting it in to a computer program and try and design out the track work didn't really give me an idea as to quite how large this was going to end up being. So I knew that we were going to have this kind of diagonal piece coming across, and it would end up pretty small, just with 3 branch lines coming out here. Because of the sweep of the station as it curves around, this ended up being a lot deeper than I was expecting. So I did narrow it down a little bit from what was on the track plan. So what I ended up having to do is reinforce all of this section. So basically it's strong enough for me to sit on. I now have the rest of the bench work on this left hand side done, and was actually a few days between this. Still have the awesome old kitchen appliances down on the bottom. They hopefully will be going away in a recycling event next weekend. So this is now pretty much all of the bench work done. So if we sweep around, this will be kind of the scenic area off to the back. I still have to put in where the goods yard would be, where tiny yard is going to be. There'll be a jut out part around here. Maybe just bring it out another 18 inches, maybe 2 feet. I haven't quite figured out the design of what that's going to be yet. But right now this is 2 feet wide, so that'll be enough to get the 2 passenger lines and then a fret line coming through, and we've put in some of the switches to where I will swing off to a tiny yard. We'll then have, coming out of the throat of the station, here is then going to be where the bulk of the station itself is going to be, which we covered in that last little clip, sweeping all the way around to then where the last time when we left off, we had all the bench work in place, didn't have any of the plywood tops down. That's all in place now. There wasn't really anything all that special to show on that. And then got plywood tops all the way around. And I did actually build out this section. What I do was originally I was going to be doing Atlas track, just because I figured that was going to be easy for me to get to over here in the US. So I was planning on Atlas track code 100. But when I was then looking more and more into, okay, I'm going to have an awful lot of points here, so if we come down into the throat of the station, get an idea as to what it would look like as it coming in over the King Edward Bridge into the south side of the station looking north. There's a lot of point work in here. There's a lot of point work over on the other side of the station as well, coming down from the north. And a lot of points over here, plus what I'm then going to end up with on the tiny yard. So I was trying to figure out how I was going to do that, because Atlas and Code 100 don't make electro frogs. You have to go to the Code 75, and even then it's kind of hit and mix as to what they have for electro frogs. And I wanted to make sure that, especially since I'm using predominantly the older Hornby locomotives, at least starting out with a lot of the older Hornby locomotives, fairly basic pickups on the bogies. I didn't want to end up with a situation where I put all of this together and then I find out that the locos are stalling as they go over the points if they were INSA frog. So I wanted to make sure that I could do electro frogs. And what I ended up doing was actually switching everything on the track plan that I had in SCOM on the computer over to Pico track. When I'd been looking online in Hattons, trying to figure out, okay, how much is it going to cost? Originally I leaned on Atlas in terms of availability, but also in terms of cost. I figured that there's no way I'm going to be able to get all the actual Pico track from the UK shipped over to the US but it actually ended up being cheaper for me to do so than to get Atlas Code 100 track here in the US. So I'm making slow but steady progress on putting all of the track bed down. Some of it is still drying a little bit, so you'll see a little bit of white glue marks on some parts. I also haven't actually glued the track down, so the radius on some of the curves aren't quite set in place because they're not holding. So I've got track pins down, or foam pins rather, right here just to kind of hold the track in place. Also to kind of hold the track bed, the foam track bed in place as well. But some of those ones on the end, those four platforms, and then a couple of these kind of middle platforms, or what would be middle platforms as well. The radius on those aren't quite set, so as you're looking, if it looks a little bit sharp, it's like, yeah, it's not quite how it's going to be. But you can sweep in, so I've got track bed all the way to here where it will break and go over to the tiny yard. But all the foam track bed is in place, running down through, this is the south side of the station, coming into where all the platforms and then going to split. And you see you'll then have those four platforms back there. And we need to work on the radius of those curves a little bit. That will be for 2 and 3 car DMUs. The main stations themselves, and then sweep around there. Only actual connection that I have for bus power is right in here, just this one. That's the only one that I've got done so far. I'm actually putting in bus power droppers feeder-wise into the bus power on pretty much every length of flex track, so probably is every 3 feet. At the most every 3 feet. But yeah, so far that's actually able to power all of this section of track, which means that you did a pretty decent job putting those joiners on. And yeah, quite happy with how all of that's running. It'll be a little bit of a while now before I can get all of the feeder wires done. So if we look under here, I've got all of the droppers in here, and it's now starting to look like Model Trent over here, especially with all those dropper wires coming in. So it's going to take me a while to get all of this done, and this is still without any of the point motors in place either. So when you figure I still have all of this to do, this is going to take me. What I'm going to start working on now is the switch control panel for all of the turnout motors for the station itself. So I think I've got 18 or 19 out of the 23 point motors fitted out with trying to put out some kind of schematic for what the station looks like. This is kind of the first revision that I had, just across 2 sheets of paper, just to make sure I had it right, and I was actually incorrect here. So then I kind of brought it up in size to something that was more usable in terms of, okay, how much space am I going to need between the little micro toggle switches that I have, so that things like that, okay, where I've got overlapping points, fine, marked out where we put LED indicators. And so this was then the final result. So this I sent this over to FedEx. FedEx Kinko's, who are a print supplier. There's probably a local print supplier that can do something similar. Just because of the size of the sheet, this is actually an 18 by 24. I really only need about 10 by 24, so I am going to trim this down a little bit. Okay, so this is now with all of these holes punched into place, and so this is all I was using. Like I said, these are designed for leather working. You can also do crafts, so there's still a little bit in the end there, but all it is a little sharp cylinder, basically, that you would then hit with a mallet, and it punches down through material. Okay, so this now is the completed construction of the panel. I'm very happy with this. All of those LEDs are now in place, so all of the green LEDs up top, yellow LEDs for all of the indicators. I just kind of carefully try and turn this around, look at the back of this, and kind of the scale of what I'm going to be building is kind of becoming rather apparent. So this now is all of that back panel wired up for LEDs, at least, so they are all now trimmed and into those connector blocks. So next step is going to be soldering all the wires for the actual toggle switches themselves. So the first half of this panel, all wired up, all the toggle switches are done, and then kind of banded together here. Each of the ends of these bundles is labeled with which toggle switch it is, 23, 20, the other one's kind of hanging out. This is Seeps PM1 point motor. That's what the bulk of the stuff that I'm using on the layout is. And then I've also then got this surface mounted one. It's a Pico PL11. There were a few places where I had to put surface mounted ones just because of the positions of the supports on the baseboards. So I have another two over here. They're actually not too bad when you get down all the way at track level. They actually end up sitting quite a ways down, so I'm actually quite happy with how they look. And then in part 2 we wired up all the north side of the station. Now I have all the south side of the station ready to actually wire into the layout. But what I'm also going to do now is do all of these LEDs as well. This is now the panel all complete. As before, there are still a few lights here that aren't correctly giving their indications just because I need those frog juices in place. But all of the south side of the station is now complete. So we can move around and flip these, and they'll all kind of move around underneath, and we can see what a rat's nest it still ended up being. So this is now, there we go, this is what it ends up looking like underneath. There are some panels I have seen that are just works of art almost. This is not. This is somewhat neatly put together. I'll try and move a little bit more and lay right underneath it. Here we go. So it is somewhat put together, neat and tidily. In terms of everything is numbered. They all follow the same kind of color consistency with the pairs of wires that are coming through from the switches. Then colored will always be one particular contact, white will always be the other contact. LEDs will always follow the same kind of convention as well. So this is first platform that I'm starting to mark out right now, and if we look underneath, what I actually did was run one of these Mark IV coaches. This will be the longest coach. So I marked this out and then put a paper template over the top, trim those, cut those to length, and what I'll now do is transfer those onto some 2mm cardstock. Here is then the card base in place. So what I did was transfer the paper templates that I had cut out onto the 2mm cardstock, cut that out, laid it down, trimmed it ever so slightly, seemed like it would fit, and then I would just tape those in place for now. So in the best tradition of Blue Peter, here's one that I made earlier. There's been a big jump from the last clip where we just saw the cardboard templates to this, and the reason being is that I'm basically throwing this one curve, literally a curve, because of these curved platforms. There is a reason why you don't see many YouTube videos and forum posts and just layouts in general of curved platforms and all of these curved, all this curved track running through stations. It is not particularly easy. We have one mostly finished platform, so I'm quite happy with how this one turned out. It's going to be a little bit of a short video. The last one was pretty long as to how I went about building this platform. So if you're interested in how we got to this stage, then go back and click on the link in the top right hand corner now. But really all I have done since the last video is go ahead and finish up this platform. So I've got the platform siding on, and I do need to kind of shape this and put it down in place. It isn't perfectly straight and level, just the way that it was put together, but otherwise I'm quite happy with how this came out. If we come in a little bit closer, dark red brick and edging on the platform sides, which is actually somewhat prototypical of what Newcastle Central was back in the late 80s. It's also very dirty as well. So that's why I went with that darker brick. I did put platform sidings on, but then the top, this is not at all the scale scenes top. I think this is actually from cleverlymodels.com. Well, I think we're starting to look a little bit more impressive now. That is now that second platform. And plus, I've also got some locos out. They're not actually going to run right now, unfortunately. There is a reason for that. It's snowing outside. It's been very, very cold here. I try to kind of do it the cheap way by not putting insulation in. And I did this back in the springtime, and now I'm kind of regretting that decision given how cold it is out here. The track is now cleaned up. There always was a quicker way for me to do this, but I didn't want to risk damaging the track at all. So a little bit of elbow grease. It really wasn't all that bad. It actually came up really quickly. So this is then what we're going to be trying to put in. This is R13 insulation, so designed for 2x4 walls, and I think this is 32 feet on each of those rolls. So they're pretty tightly wound and compressed, but once it opens up you'll see that it's actually about 3.5 inches thick. Alright, so it may not look pretty, but all of the ceiling is now done. If we come down, so this is where you come in. Here's the doors. I do have some of the gaps to fill, but all the way around now the ceiling is now done. There's one of the gaps to fill. So that up there was a pan. That's about 11 to 12 feet off the ground. Yeah, so it's been a fun process, but can definitely feel the difference in here now. Well, we've now got most of the walls done now. So we've got the foam boards on the part where it was the weird kind of slats. The top open parts are then filled in with more of the fast insulation. I have then run out of the fast insulation now, which is why it's just the polystyrene boards up there. They are meant to be insulating boards, so we'll see. Some electrical work today. A couple of different things that I want to try and do. At least one I'm going to do. The other one I might wait on. But I've got a few of these frog juices from Town Valley Depot, and the idea of these is that for any of your points that you have that don't have frog switching on them. So if we come over, I have electro frog points and everything, but I have surface mount Pico points. There's 3 on the north side of the station, there's 2 on the south side of the station. So all my other points are hooked up with Seeps PM1 point motors, so as you would throw the point, the frog polarity will automatically change as well, so as your trends go over, they've got the correct polarity. On those surface mount Pico points, and actually a number of other points that don't have the built-in switch, then you don't get that frog polarity changing. Alright, so real quick, this is what one of the frogs looks like outside of the bag, and so they are the droppers for DCC bus running off there. The middle one that's left free, that's what then actually hooked up to the wire that comes out of the frog. This is affectionately what I'm calling the third platform build. It's actually way more than just the third platform. This is probably going to end up getting broken into 3 platforms actually by itself. So as I've done with the first couple of platform builds, tap together a bunch of paper and then lay it over, and what I'll now do is then go and just very roughly mark out where the rails are, and then trim it back, and then with the couch running around, pencil either on the outside, the inside, the middle of the couch. That then gives the overhang that is required for the couches. Trim the paper back again, transfer that onto card, and bring the card back out, make sure that it comes together, and then I'll actually put the actual platform sides on to raise it up and kind of go on from there. Okay, so that is the other 2 platforms now in place, and now you can see kind of why I built myself up to it. So when I did the first platform, which was this one right here, and I'll link to it, you can click on it in the corner of the video right now. When I did this first platform, there were a couple of comments that were just like, wow, I didn't pick the easy one to start with. I actually feel like it was, even though it was a double curve, it's actually the smallest. I then moved on to the second platform build, and that one actually went pretty smooth. You know, I'd had to do this one twice. This first platform I built, didn't really like how it turned out, did it a second time, and by then I'd figured it out. So this one was then the second one, and even though it's really just one gentle curve towards the end there, it is a much bigger platform to try and deal with. And the whole reason why I did it in that order was now you can see that this one at the back just completely dwarfs these first two. Platform siding and edging pieces are going pretty good. Not a whole lot to show on the edging pieces. They're just strips like this, and so they glue on the inside. They're fairly straightforward. Just cut them to length and then glue them down. The actual capping stones themselves, these edging pieces here, they're a little bit... Those two platform pieces put in place. You can see you've got one of the DMUs already parked up there. It's kind of hanging out, and then you get some idea with this HST parked up in place. This is a 6+2 HST. I think they're actually Mark 4 coaches. Yeah, but they're the long ones as opposed to these shorty Mark 3s that are in front. So you can get a full 6+2 rack quite comfortably, actually, because you've got the locals quite comfortably on the platform. You could probably actually stretch it out maybe and get one more coach in there. All of the rest of the inside edging done. Well, it comes across on the camera a little bit easier maybe down there, and all the way into the end of the station, and then the rest of that side that we had started all the way down there. This is now the finished platforms. All done, all three of them. Well, technically all three parts of those back ones, and then those two. So this is now all of the station platforms for Newcastle Central done. I've moved one of the HSTs that's been hanging out in front here just so you can kind of see a little bit more.